Hey everyone, my name is Asher, and here at the Next 50, we're focused on spotlighting those laptops, desktops, real computing devices that the next 50% of the world that don't have access to desktop computing yet could really use and legitimately take advantage of to get online. Today though, we're taking a look at this. This is the Toposh 15.6-inch Intel Celeron based quad-core laptop. This thing's about 300 bucks. It's got some pretty impressive specs, and I'm really curious what it's like. So let's dive right in to see how this laptop compares and whether you should be thinking about spending $300 of your hard-earned cash on this thing. Let's go. All right, everyone, here it is. This is the laptop itself. As I mentioned, I bought this for around $300. The price fluctuates a little bit. I'll link it in the description. This is from AliExpress. I think I got mine for exactly around $310, so really not bad. This is a laptop I'm gonna put aside for a second. I'm in this very unsuspecting box. You've got this wonderful life. I honestly don't even know what that means. Ought to be you. Gefair? Who knows? On the inside, it actually did come with a few things. It came with a mouse pad. It's kind of nice. Was very much not expecting in the mouse pad. It also came with a Ethernet adapter. This is only 100 megabit. Honestly, that's not great. Surprisingly, came with this bad boy. What they would call a gaming mouse. I'm not sure if I would go that far. It is incredibly plasticky, but it does have a DPI control. Buttons feel okay. This is not good feeling, but overall, not the worst thing in the world. It's nice that they include it, and you're actually going to want to use this because, as we'll find out in a second, the touchpad on that thing is not great. So here is the device itself. We can take a quick look at the kind of outside of this thing. It's all plastic. I left the outside plastic on here, but there is a bit of a film here on the outside that's currently there that you can remove. Totally plastic construction. You've got on this side a barrel jack, which I'm not a fan of. I would love for that to be USB-C, but at this price point, what are you gonna expect? I think it's 20 watts, so super low power. USB 3.0 port, mini HDMI, haven't seen those very much. On the other side, you've got headphone jack, which is great. You've got an SD card reader, and then the USB 3.0 port again. So okay I/O, not amazing. I would love to see full-size HDMI, honestly, but otherwise not terrible. On the back, you've actually got this window here for upgradability. I'll show you that a little bit later. Otherwise, zero ventilation. This is a passively cooled device, as far as I can tell, meaning that this will get hot very quickly, but we'll look more into that later. As I said, pretty plasticky construction. You open it up and you can kind of almost hear and feel just how plasticky it really is. There it is. Honestly, pretty solid construction in general though. Again, for the price, this touchpad, not great. I'm not sure if you can really tell on the camera, but there's like this weird, funky, you can kind of see it right there at the very bottom of it. It's like the film has like an air gap in it. And I've tried to remove this, or I don't think it's meant to be removed. I think that's just what they put on it. An actual Intel sticker, it has a legit Intel chip on the inside. And then the keyboard itself is pretty solid. So chassis flex is 100% a thing on this device. You probably won't be able to really see this on camera, but it bends. It bends a lot. It's plastic though. Like this is a plastic, 100% plastic, zero metal involved device. You kind of expect it, especially this price point. So I'm gonna be honest, the speakers in this thing are not great. They're not what I would consider anything close to real audio grade that you'd want to listen to. Able to take video calls, play some music, play a YouTube video, play Netflix, but they're honestly just like not amazing. You're definitely gonna want a separate set of speakers or just listen through headphones, which it does have a headphone jack, so you'll be able to do that, but I think that that's more what you're gonna want to do. Okay, so the display is where this thing actually does much better than you might expect, given its price point and given kind of how it's positioned. So I've got both these laptops here turned up to their max brightness. I think the Toposh that we're looking at is only about 250 nits, whereas this Lenovo, which is a ThinkPad X1 Carbon, totally different class of laptop, I know. It has a much brighter screen. We're looking at closer to 400 nits, I think. 1080p, 1920 by 1200, different screen sizes. I know not a great comparison necessarily, but wanted to show you guys how well this laptop can actually hold up in a screen test. So I'm just gonna play these videos really quick and just kind of have this running. This thing actually does pretty well. It's shocking really how well this computer is good for just media consumption. Now you'll see that the colors pop a lot more here on the right compared to the left. Not even really close in terms of the color reproduction. However, it's still super clear. It has this nice kind of glossy finish, which honestly is great for content consumption and just generally watching movies and things like that. This will be a great device for 1080p YouTube, 1080p Netflix, 1080p HBO. Again, it's not the top of the line, but we're talking about 300 bucks, and this thing is truly pretty solid looking, especially even when compared to a device that's, you know, $1,200 to $1,300 brand new. So I wanted to show y'all a little bit more of how this thing comes pre-configured, and there really isn't too much to show here, but just the fact that you basically get just PC, this local account that comes preloaded on the computer. You are then expected to sign in and take whatever settings that they have. Honestly, I would probably just reset the computer if I was buying this. I'm not a huge fan of how it kind of came pre-logged in and with a local account. Would have loved just the traditional kind of experience out of the box for a Windows PC. Okay, so you're probably most curious about how does this thing do in day-to-day tasks? What is the performance actually like on this thing? Well, I'm happy to say it's pretty solid. As I mentioned before, it's got an Intel Celeron N5105. That's a 10 nanometer chip. So it's the latest and greatest from Intel in terms of its lithography. What that means is lower power consumption and more performance at a given level of power. Now, this thing is really designed for bursty workloads, and what that means is that launching any sort of applications, doing quick little things that you might need to do, it's great. This thing will absolutely crush anything that you really needed to do from a daily perspective. I think as soon as you start getting into sustained workloads, it gets a little bit messier. So I can show you right now, if I go over to Firefox, let's load up maybe a web page. It's, I don't know, a little more intense. You know, let's look at The Verge. Pretty quick. Load stuff in. You're able to scroll down. As you can see, it's a little stuttery here and there, but it's also loading all these ads and crap that The Verge has on their website. And it's not bad. Super usable experience. Honestly, pretty solid. Again, we're on battery right now, so it's not maybe operating at its absolute fastest. Click on an article, boom, right into it, loads it up. Totally usable. Amazing as a kind of, I think, work and office machine. Not sure if I would take it much beyond that, but completely functional in that purpose. Okay, so let's kick off the synthetic benchmarks with a look at Crystal Disk Mark. So I've got it running right now. I'll snap back in when it's done, but my guess is that this can perform pretty similar to just a regular old SATA SSD, which honestly, that's completely acceptable for a laptop of this class. Okay, so we are all done here. As you can see, the Crystal Disk Mark results are pretty in line with what you'll find for most SATA SSDs. So this is not a PCIe, but this is significantly faster than your typical, spinning hard disk. Again, I think that this is completely acceptable for this price point of a laptop, and you honestly won't really notice the storage speed in day-to-day use. So now we've got Cinebench R20 running here, and as you can see, this is painful. It's taken about a minute just to get to the black screen here. There we go, start running in a second. As I mentioned earlier in the review, this device does not have active cooling. So once it runs the CPU for longer than, let's say, 10, 20, 30 seconds, it gets warm enough that it throttles itself back. This thing is pretty bad at sustained workloads. We'll see how it does here. As you can see, at least it's got those 4 threads running, which makes some difference, but this is not going to be a speed demon by any means. Let's just kind of let it run and see what happens. Just want to check back in while this thing is still running, and we can see the kind of usage in Task Manager. As you can see, we're looking at about a 1.99 gigahertz clock, so pretty much it's just chilling by its base clock and stays there. And it's actually been holding pretty well. I would have actually thought by now we would have thrown our way out of it, but we're still holding around the base clock. Now, it's not fast, and it's using about 6 watts of power, so super power efficient, but this is not going to be your record setter overclocking beast, and unfortunately I don't think you can get that speed to go any higher. There's just no thermal headroom for this thing. It's already pushing itself to at times well over 90 degrees, so we're at the max. I'll tune back in when this test finally finishes. Okay, so somehow I got significantly worse on this run than I did when I tested it before. We only got 384 points in Cinebench R20, which is rough. But in the past, I've gotten as high as 600, and when you get to 600, you're down here, you're looking at least better than a 5th gen i5, which, again, not amazing. This thing isn't great at sustained loads, again, which suggests to use this only for office work, school work, etc. 3D rendering is not what it's designed for. Here we are in Rocket League. This is running at 720p with lowest settings possible. It looks like garbage, but it is running. We're getting about 30 FPS. I've seen this thing get up to 40. For some reason, it's a little temperamental right now, but this thing's gone up to 40. It's somewhat usable. I don't know if I would say that you should get this to actually play real games. Ultimately, this is not going to be a great gaming device locally. Now, what you could do is you could buy one of those cloud gaming services and use that, or play incredibly basic games. And I'm talking more basic than Rocket League at 720p low settings, right? So maybe some MOBAs, maybe some old emulated games, but this is not going to be a gaming beast. Just know that when you get this laptop. Okay, so battery life is also not this thing's strong suit. I would have thought that it would actually be pretty good. When I was running my tests, I was observing that under the heaviest of loads, this CPU really, because it's thermally constrained, isn't drawing more than 6 or 7 watts. Right? It's tiny, it's nothing. You would think that this thing would last forever and ever. Not the case. It has a pretty small battery. I think the screen draws a lot of power. And the combination of those two things make it so that this device is not great from a battery life perspective. I think you're probably looking at somewhere around 3 to 4 hours. The good thing is that it recharges quickly because it's got that small battery. If you do anything heavier, honestly, even playing like 1080p video on YouTube, you're probably looking at less, closer to 2 to 3 hours, which I would say is not great for a laptop like this. Okay, so now I want to take a quick look here at the upgradability of this thing. As you can see, we've got this nice little slot here on the back, just 2 quick screws to be removed. Once you pop those off, you can pretty easily just reach in here and it just comes right off. Super easy. Now, you might have expected to see RAM or something else. No, it's actually a 3.5-inch hard drive or solid state drive bay. So you could upgrade your storage right here, super easy. Don't even have to take all these screws on the outside off. Just pop it off, boom, easy swap. Let's take a quick look now deeper inside this thing. Here it is, the inside of the Toposh laptop. So this thing popped off actually relatively easily. It's just a few screws around the outside. As you can see, there's not a lot in here. This is super empty. Battery, very tiny, just these 2 cells sitting over here. Tons and tons of empty space. This is, I think, actually metal, at least on the inside, right? It's not entirely plastic. We've got all this heat spreader here. Again, the heat spreader is totally passive. If you look on the actual, case, you can see that there's like this little metal sheet with this, I think assume like a thermal pad, designed for some level of cooling or transferring heat to the case. But let's be honest, it doesn't do a whole lot. You've got the spot for the 3.5-inch SSD or hard drive here. You can see the M.2 drive that looks like it could be relatively upgradable. Seems like it has space for different sizes. Right now it's got this funky, like, smaller one with an extender built into it. But you could pretty easily swap that out. You've got your I/O sitting over here, tiny little speakers here at the bottom. You can kind of see the trackpads peeking through on the other side here. What's notably missing is the memory. I assume the memory is underneath here somewhere, either soldered to the board, or if there are regular, sticks, I don't see them, and honestly, I don't really want to go to the trouble of pulling all this thing off. So I would just assume the memory that it comes with is kind of the memory you get, unfortunately. Not as upgradable as I would have hoped. The good thing is I do see an Intel Wi-Fi chip up here, and you can see the antenna going through, so that's at least a nice thing to have on a laptop, again, in this price class. Overall, like, relatively replaceable and upgradable, all things considered. Although I would just buy the RAM configuration you want at the outset instead of trying to upgrade again later. This is an excellent device for people who are doing office work, if you are, just trying to do basic introductory computing. I think anything like that, that probably accounts for most people in the world. I think you are golden with this device. I think if you're trying to do anything heavier, gaming, content creation, even like certain heavier coding applications, I just don't think this device is going to be for you. I think also, depending on where you are in the world, if you're in a warmer climate, this is not going to be a great device. Because it's passively cooled, if you're sitting in a warm home, this thing is going to throttle like nobody's business. I think if you're in a more moderate or cooler part of the world, this is a much better device for you, and I'd highly recommend it. Overall though, I think for the price, you're not going to get anything a lot better. You're not going to get anything with 16 gigs of RAM. You're not going to get anything with this kind of storage or this performance at this price, especially with the screen that you get and all the other kind of niceties that the laptop throws in. So I think for the price, amazing device. I think you just have to think about your specific use case and what you're trying to get out of it. With that, we'd love to wrap this video up. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next one where we try to look at how this device compares to a desktop running the same CPU chip, but actually actively cooled with a fan. How does that make a difference? Stay tuned.